Hello and welcome to the GCI Summit. I'm really delighted to be joined on this session by two experts who will be talking about taking cannabis studies through to clinical trials. Joining me today is Professor Hinanit Kolti from the Volcani Center and Ameet Sule from H&T Presspart. So let's dive straight into the deep end. Hinanit, would you be able to tell us about your previous experience that you had in taking research projects through to trials?
Indeed. The research that we do in the lab, in my lab, is mainly preclinical. It means that for validation of our results, we need to have clinical trials. And because of that, we work in a very close and good collaboration with hospitals in Israel, with physicians. We build together the bioassays that enable us to establish the results, and then we take these results into clinical trials. So I would say that one, the collaboration with the hospitals and physicians, MDs, is most important. By that, we're able to get as close to the patient as possible, even before commencing clinical trials. Then, the results, as I said, should be verified by clinical studies. And I think that this can be done in collaboration also with the industry. Because as for us, as a research institute, we cannot support clinical trials on our own. This is a free entities collaborations, research, medicine, and business.
Yeah, for me, coming from a pharma background, I think clinical trial is the key to launch a product in the market. So, as we already know from to get one compound into clinical trial, there are 5,000 compounds which are screened before a compound makes it to a clinical trial. So there's a lot of preclinical work which goes in prior to taking the compound into clinical trials. So I would say it's kind of a triangle. You have regulations at the top, and then there at the base there are three. One is the CMC, or we call it the chemistry, manufacturing, and controls. The second is the non-clinical aspects. So the toxicology, the delivery systems, the components which we want to, how safe are there. And the third is the clinical trials. So this as a whole comes into play before, and the regulations are at the top. So everyone, each aspect of clinical, non-clinical, or CMC is regulated by the regulations of the land.
And you may have almost touched on this a little bit here, Ameet, but sort of in your opinion, what are the typical barriers in getting research projects off the ground and into trials? And maybe as an extension of that, are there certain types of research that are destined to succeed and sail through the trials? And I guess conversely, is there a way of telling ahead of time sort of what type of research projects are more likely to fail?
Yeah, more likely to fail. I think that's a interesting point. We always, the researcher is always optimist that his project will always reach to the end point. However, this is the probability of reaching that end point is quite low in terms of the trials required and the product development required. So I would say the challenges are more on the clinical side. Of course, there are product development challenge. You need to understand how to what's the therapeutic dose required, where's the target site of action of the drug, uh, what's the device you are going to deliver it, what are the non-clinical aspects which are little bit less challenging. But if you say my key barriers are from taking the compound from a development stage to a formulation. So as you know, the active on its own cannot be delivered to a patient as it is. You have to you have to formulate in some way so that it is feasible to the patient to accept.
I would like to add to what Amit said, and taking the same line, is that I think that in order for a project not to get into the death valley and not reaching clinical trials, from the beginning, the researchers should take into consideration regulation. The researchers from the early beginning of even of the preclinical research need to decide on what regulatory path they want to go. Do they want to a product to go into pharma, or maybe to OTC, over the counter, or maybe a cosmetic product, and so on. Each of these paths requires different regulation, different experiment systems, and also even in the preclinical stage, it is important at least to have a path, to know what avenue to take in terms of, for example, a determination of the active compounds. I will just give a quick example. If we are a priori going to a pharma product, then we would try to make a preclinical studies on a single compound, maybe two, maybe three, but not more than that. But if we are going for an OTC, then definitely we can think of full spectrum or a more complex composition of active plant ingredients. So just to say that the researchers, the scientists, and for preclinical and clinical trials need to know beforehand where they're going to.
Yeah, and maybe a short addition to Professor Hinanit's answer. Maybe even in the clinical setup, the rate of success is very low. Means you need to have a good power of the test, or you need to, and when you say power to the test, that means you need to have a wide sample of subjects. More the subjects, better is the power, better is the chances of understanding the clinical effects early on.
So once you're into that early phase of the clinical trials, you've passed through your preclinical work, you've moved your research into phase one. What can researchers and organizations do to ensure that their projects really have the best chance to progress once they're at this stage? Perhaps over to you first, Hinanit.
I think that first and for all, you need money. These are highly costly studies, and a company should consider going into clinical trials once they know that they have enough money to progress from phase one to phase two to phase three as needed. But again, this depends on regulation. And just taking the same line that I talked about before, the companies need to decide on the product and then to decide on the course of the clinical trials accordingly. Because some of the products, like OTC or cosmetic products, requires much less regulation than pharma products. So perhaps going into phase two and three is not a necessity. So I think first you need money, that's for sure. Second, you need to take the right path. and to make the proper considerations in order to have the best rate of success. I fully agree with Ameet saying that most of the clinical trials do not bear success, unfortunately. But, and this is also something that the developing company should take into consideration. For that, I believe we, the scientists, take part in the ability to act and according to the results. Let's say that an experiment, a clinical trial, phase one is being done and not completely successful, then the results should go back to the lab, or the products should developing products should go back to the lab to be improved in order to have a better chance of success. So I think here, beyond what I said, is the need for a close collaboration between the preclinical and clinical studies by different bodies.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think again, coming from our pharma side, we always are, and it goes in the same way for every therapeutic every area as well, that safety and efficacy are the main targets of the clinical. Is the product safe for the patient, and is the product efficacious at the targeting site of action? Does it give the benefit, does it give the desired effect, is something clinical researchers see after the phase one. Ideally, what's the dose of the product? Is it the correct therapeutic dose? I will give you an example of inhalation. So the dose via inhalation is about one fifth, or generally in general terms, of the oral dose. So if you're developing a cannabis inhaler, you don't need to give a 10 milligram dose per shot to the patient. Even a 2 to 3 milligram is good enough, because the dose reaches the target site of action much quicker. The bioavailability is much better than an oral dose, which goes through the GI tract and the metabolism after it. So after the first phase one in 2 and 3, or 2 and 2A and 2B, generally researchers look for the therapeutic dose which would be beneficial. Yeah.
And in comparison to traditional pharma products and how they progress through trials, what would you say are the added complexities of taking research to trials involving cannabis compounds?
This, as a matter of fact, we have published a scientific paper on this subject in a European Journal of Pharmaceutical Studies, and now we are just in the last stages of revision of another paper. Soon I hope to be accepted in Molecules. Indeed, going through regulation of any products that contain multiple compounds is definitely not an easy task. There are quite a number of difficulties in regulating and approving and registering products that compose of more than one compounds. And definitely when we are talking about cannabis and multiple compounds, then the difficulty and the challenges are much bigger. Here, I would like to point that once we talk on cannabis products, we can talk on three different kinds of products. One is a single compound, and we do have examples in the market of FDA-approved products that are a single compound, or maybe a combination of two compounds of THC and CBD in the market, FDA approved. However, we do not have FDA or any other agency approved products of cannabis of multiple compounds. Here again, we can divide these products to two. One is full spectrum. Full spectrum products bears a problem or a difficulty, I would say, of first of composition and second of mode of action. Once we do not know everything, all compounds in a product, then this is one difficulty for registration. And the other one, once we have no idea how these compounds are working, definitely not together. So that's a major obstacle. That's one. Another kind of products from cannabis is products that are based on active plant ingredients. Here, we're talking about products that are composed of certain sets of cannabis-derived compounds. We know exactly what this API mixture contains, and we even know a little bit of the mode of action. Here too, it's challenging to register such products, which might be composed of 4 or 5 different compounds, and sometimes even more. But since we are very much aware of the entourage effect and the advantage of using several compounds rather than a single one coming from cannabis, then definitely this is a challenge that we need to overcome.
Yeah, and I think I will also like to add today on the overall cannabis market is kind of uh, defined or structured into four different parts. One is the medical market, the other is pharma, which is very, very small, then the wellness and the recreational. So the key products today are more into the wellness and recreational, where very less clinical data is available. And today the market is growing, so it is growing almost at a rate of 20%. So I believe there are a lot more clinical trials required, and I'm sure there are clinical trials going all around the world, but there are still more required because there are different routes of administration in the cannabis area today. You have oral, you have topical, you have inhalation as well. You have other formulations like by tincture, tinctures or by sprays. But I, I believe there is a lack of clinical data available or lack of evidence of efficacy, and hence it has taken a long time for this acceptance that yeah, this is a therapy which can be explored. No doubt it has in the last few years there are a lot of opportunities, and there are a lot of uh, players coming into the cannabis field, but still it is been seen as a more of a startup idea rather than a real a kind of a therapy which can be taken ahead to a large number of patients. Also, today the global quality standards are not yet established, so it is mainly to the individual jurisdiction or individual states setting standards. And I think these are also the challenges I believe the developers around the world are facing at the moment. Maybe Professor Hinanit would like to add some more on the challenges from the development side.
Absolutely. I think that development-wise, when we are talking about complex products, then what we have to do is, as said, first to identify all compounds, but this is not enough. What we do is we then identify the active compounds. And as a matter of fact, we see in some of the cases, not always, but in some of the cases, we see interaction between the active compounds and even synergistic interactions, where we see that 1 and 1 is not 2, 1 is and 1 is 20 in terms of activity. So as said, 1 is to know all compounds, 2 is to identify and perhaps isolate the active compounds, and then 3 is the ability to learn something on the mode of action of these different compounds, either receptors involved or signaling biological pathways or signaling pathways that are being activated or repressed as a result of the treatment and so on. These are quite complex studies, and quite a lot of information is needed. And these are serving as tools for the next steps of development, utilizing or developing the proper drug delivery that Ameet talked about. And then the challenging of registration, as said, which is new, and always doing things that are new is not an easy task. But again, I think it's important to do that to have the best benefit to the patients.
Yeah, that's interesting thing you talked about on the synergistic effect or the entourage. Today, everybody talks of CBD, the cannabidiol, or the THC primarily, but the cannabis plant has much more constituents in CBG, etc. And also there are terpenes which add to the flavor, so and can help in the entourage effect as well. So I think these are the areas which still need to be explored. And as we and coming back to the word synergy, in pharma, when two drugs are combined, they give a more synergistic effect, or the efficacy gets enhanced, as we say. And this is something I think researchers are trying to understand by the entourage effect.
And I guess building on that point, sort of looking at isolate versus full spectrum, to what extent is it possible to run effective trials on variable compounds like full spectrum versus how pharma products are typically created using isolated compounds? And, I guess sort of moving on, can the entourage effect be truly realized in the traditional mold of how pharma products are created?
For the first part of your question about the full spectrum, I have to say, and this is my opinion, I think that conducting clinical trials on full spectrum suffer from a very big deficiency in knowledge. It means that once you treat, even in very well designed clinical trials, if you use full spectrum, then it means that you don't really know what you're giving the patients. And not just that, once you don't know what you're giving the patients, then you don't know how to repeat the clinical trial properly. We do know that cannabis preparations are different between producers, between lots of the same producer, between times of the year, and so doing a full spectrum clinical trials is not good enough. Rather, for clinical trials, you should start from a very well defined composition of compounds that you give the patients. Now, as said, this can be a single compound, and this was done before by GW, for example, and was FDA approved, and this is good. But since we do know that there is an entourage effect and the patients benefit more from a more a wider area of compounds coming together, then what needs to be done, in my opinion, is not to give the full spectrum. This is not the answer. The answer is to give a proper composition of active compounds or API, active plant ingredients. This is what the patients should get, and this is what clinical trials should be on after activity was proved and characterized in preclinical trials. Then you are able to give the patients what might be needed for the optimal treatment of the medical condition.
Yeah, I think so. From my chemistry point of view, I believe that the API or the plant cannabis is the key to this. How you uh, the crop, is it you get a standard quality of CBD, THC, and the other constituents from that? Are you able to control that? Are you able to control the level of THC? Are you able to get a good mix of the ingredients you need for an entourage effect, and then progressing them to a clinical trials? Because this API is, once the flower has been plucked, it goes through a lot of processes, like it goes through chromatography, it goes to distillation, and then these processes finally give you the isolate. Or filtration process are key as well, and then but how are you able to control these processes, I think, is a very critical question. And I fully agree with Professor Hinanit over here that if the patient or if the illness does not need a mixture of CBD and its various other constituents of the cannabis, I think it's safer to uh, 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 go ahead with uh, just a single constituent. But again, it's the clinical trial which tells you, yeah, this is the concentration, this is the effect, this is the therapeutic dose. We have companies like GW Pharma who have done a lot of studies very early on, and they have targeted like illnesses like epilepsy, etc. So I think, yeah, a lot more needs to be done over here, so that the patient gets the value of the medication.
I think Dr. Ameet did here a very important clarification, and thank you for that. I believe that we need to see cannabis flowers as a raw material.
Hmm.
And then this raw material should go into processing, just as Dr. Amit said, into processing for the extraction, purification, and the production of the API. So cannabis flowers should be good and with high quality and no contaminants. But this is only the first step. And then they should go into processing in the industry to have the best product that we can give the patients.
And something else that you have both previously touched upon within this discussion is delivery mechanisms. Now, Ameet, to what extent do delivery mechanisms impact upon how efficacious the findings are in these trials?
Yeah, delivery mechanism play an important role. If you see what are the delivery mechanisms of today of cannabis, smoking or vaping is the highest percentage of the way the cannabis formulations are done. And it accounts to like about 30 to about 30 to 80% of a delivery mechanism. Then you have edibles, like gummies, etc., which account to 4 to 20%. When I say percent, means the percent of the cannabis medication reaching the site of action, or sublingual tinctures, which account for about 40 to 50%, avoiding the first pass mechanism. So delivery mechanism plays an important role. Absolutely, means there is one nasal rescue inhaler, I believe, with cannabis for migraine seizures. So it's if a person has a seizure or a migraine, he might have a challenge to take a pill or have a weight pain to have that medication, but a nasal device can be a quicker way to take the medication. Also, inhalation. If you, it's a tried and tested process where you have this inhaler, which is being used for asthma and COPD over the years, which is a safe medication, a safe delivery system, as against vaping, where you have to inhale combustibles, solvents, which might be toxic, and this might create another challenge. While the inhaler components are being have been in the year have been in the market for more than 50 to 70 years. They have been tested rigorously. Even the elastomers, the plastic components, the canisters, the actuators, they are have been tested for biocompatibility. So it's a safe method. I just take an example of inhaler because that's very close to what I do regularly within my scope of work. So this is a very safe and efficacious use of the device for the patient. And I think again, the stress is that uh, I always stress on the word safety. How safe, how comfortable, because it's also the patient handling is something which in our pharma field we look at very closely. How comfortable, how intuitive is the device for the patient to use. Maybe Professor Hinanit has some more experience to share with.
I think that you are the expert here, Dr. Amit. I'm not an expert in drug delivery, so I'm very good with your answer.
Thank you. I think it also when a product has been developed, it's the a supply or a strong supply chain, and the other factors which comes with the taking the product to the market. So focus on quality systems, safer devices, how it can how the patient can use it intuitively. These are the factors which work uh, on from the device point of view. And I think there is a collaboration which comes into place where the researcher or the formula developer develops his own product, and the device manufacturer devices, and we and in the FDA terms, it is called as a combination product. So the device and the formulation both go hand in hand. So that will play, I believe, it will play a very important role in cannabis CBD and cannabis delivery. I think overall there is a lot of work going on, but there is needs to be still more to be done. And I think overall the channelizing of this various aspects coming together and providing a better treatment to the patient is should be the core focus, because I see this therapy as more as it gives a value to the patient who cannot benefit from traditional medications as a result of uh, damage organs or compromise immune system. So I'm a great fan of this delivery and as a product to the patient.
And now we all know that projects like this don't often happen in total isolation. And in that, Hinanit, how can third parties support researchers and organizations in their endeavors to take their research projects through to trials?
I think that the major point is the ability to collaborate from different disciplines. Interdisciplinary projects and collaborations is the key for successful projects. We need collaborations of biologists, chemists, physicians, and regulatory consultants, even engineers perhaps for a proper drug delivery.
Mhm.
And together, I believe that working together, bringing together this expertise, then we can have research and development that may lead to new products, better products than what we have today. So one collaboration is multidisciplinary, and the other one is maybe multi-institutional, because we need the research institute to work with the hospital, to work with the commercial company that is able to bring the money, to bring investors in, and to go from preclinical to clinical trials, and then to drug development.
Yeah, I think and it said it all. Collaboration is the key word over here. So that's I think is the main thing, main way you can take it ahead. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a lovely place to wrap today. Collaboration is key. I'd like to first and foremost say thank you so much to Professor Hinanit and Ameet, our expert panelists, for joining us for this session. And viewers, if you do have any questions or queries or would like to pick the brains of either of our expert panelists today, please do jump on the networking app and contact them directly. On the app, you're able to direct message our experts. You're able to set up meetings. You can set up video meetings if you have Q&As and you want to do it over the internet airwaves. There's lots of possibilities for you to pick the brains of our expert panelists and other leaders that are at the summit as well. So please, if you have any questions, do jump straight on the app and approach our leaders directly. But for the time being, I'd like to say once again, thanks so much to Hinanit and Ameet. And viewers, I hope you enjoy the rest of the GCI Summit and the sessions that are there for you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for setting it up.